Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Looks like there's going to be some Forbidden List, Limited Lists changes. This is another stream, and frankly for the foreseeable future, for the rest of the week at least, I'm going to just be very tight on time, so I just need to jump through the news as quickly as possible. Plus, we're experimenting with just getting rid of the accountability section for the most part. I could easily say I didn't do anything YouTube related at all yesterday anyway, so as far as being accountable and making content, didn't accomplish anything at all. I could complain about still testing and tweaking my Tuya smartphone, smart home apps and smart bulbs. Arguably, I think I am at the point where I should have definitely gotten Zigbee bulbs just for the faster response and better connectivity issues instead of Wi-Fi bulbs. But even that is limiting the amount of possible possible devices you can get off Amazon of these two Chinese smart apps. I was looking for like a ceiling fan in particular that would be Tuya compatible, and there's basically one on Amazon. In particular, there is this point now where when looking for a ceiling fan, a lot of ceiling fans have LEDs built into them, so there is just no bulb socket per se. So you couldn't switch the bulb if the technology changed or add something later after the fact. So you kind of need to probably avoid those and just stick with the good old-fashioned light bulb socket type fans. But if you do that in a ceiling fan with a light kit, then you are running into an issue where you're going to inherently not be able to control the ceiling fan for the amount of features you would like. In that it might give you a remote, and a good unit might let you remotely reverse the direction on the fan, but a lot of remotes don't really let you reverse the direction on the fan. And so if you've got a ceiling fan that is very high up, where you would have to get on a ladder to split the switch, then you're not getting any additional benefit from those lower level remote things. You probably would be able to dim the lights, but certainly you wouldn't be able to change the color. And it's not so much about changing the color of the lights, because honestly it will be a rare case that you'd want light bulbs in a ceiling fan to flicker like red and green, or do like a disco party mode. Some Tuya bulbs certainly will do that and sell those as features, but what you want to be able to do is balance out whether you want a warm light, a neutral light, or a cool light. So the color temperature of a white light bulb is much more important to balance out with other bulbs in the same room, or to even shift it to different times. They definitely push the whole idea of using blue light filters on like Android phones, and I'm sure there's a similar thing on iPhones to reduce eye strain. And so if you could do that with all your lighting and move to a warmer, more cozy light color temperature later in the evening, that could be very nice. Particularly if you can automate all of that. And that is certainly something you won't get on even a medium quality ceiling fan with a light kit is you'll have a remote, but it's all manual input. There's no way to schedule anything. There's no app. Maybe there would be a timer to auto shut off. The other thing, and certainly the number one thing before any of that though, is you want a ceiling fan that has a good motor in it, something that won't break, or that doesn't have components that will break, and that can actually move a decent amount of air. Now, that also drastically depends on where you're living. And in a lot of places, ceiling fans barely pushing maybe 600 to 800 cubic feet per minute might be fine, where you might want triple, quadruple, or even more of that, depending on just how big your room is and how much you want air to move around to cool. And you can get a general indicator there if a ceiling fan has only 3 modes as far as 3 speeds. That tends to be about average, and arguably that also means most motors are really only tested to be at 3 different loads, 3 different speeds. But if you could get one with 6 speeds, then or more, you probably have a better range in which you could get the right speed for your likeness. They have quite a few wild designs that ideally I would like to buy. There's what they're calling enclosed fans on Amazon, where the fan blades are in the center and there's a cover over it, and in that case the fan blades tend to be just plastic, not long wooden blades, so they don't look very traditional. But then they have lighting in LED rings all around the edges, which that is certainly a better system to light up a room, to point more all around the room and all at the walls, versus most light kits and ceiling fans are doing a cone that is beneath it that tends to be wide enough with diffuser glass and things to fill up a room and make it feel that way. But you definitely get the corners that meet the ceilings. They aren't getting direct lighting. So, like, ideally, I think that probably is a better system for lighting, but it is also so incredibly non-traditional in its appearance that it would be hard to buy for that. Inherently, a lot of these ceiling fans are tiny, so you have to look at the size, because they are a lot of them are coming from like Korean, Asian, China companies for tiny little Chinese apartments, and they definitely are going for a different art style, because there is really not that tradition as far as any kind of construction in China compared to the United States. So much more Chinese people, I think, are much more willing to have modern looking houses, whereas in the United States, the United States in general is fairly conservative, but design wise they're pretty conservative. They want their ceiling fans to look like the ceiling fans that were in houses 50, 60 years ago. Let's see. I think I can special summon this, sacrificing that, if I remember how to play this deck. Then we can destroy 1 card on the field, which can just be this face down card, which was a trap. We can place our own trap, Then we can go into attack mode. And oh, I guess we can just attack directly. Of course, he's got some strategy here that's doing something crazy that I wasn't expecting. Alright, well, guess we have to end our turn. The other thing, I said I wasn't doing an accountability section, and I'm basically still doing it. Yeah, and again, this is a stream that I may just get a phone call and have to end immediately, so apologies if I end abruptly. The other thing, though, is as I'm looking at, like, for bathroom fixtures, I just have a lot of lighting that is mismatched and or broken that has been that way for a while, but it needs to be fixed. Probably quicker than later with everything moving to built-in LEDs. So you have like track lighting that a lot of them want to use this two-prong bulbs that are far less common, and then ceiling fans want to use what they call candelabra base bulbs that are screw-in types, but they're much smaller screw-in bases, so you would need an adapter. They do make adapters that go both directions, so it's not that big of a deal. But the two-prong adapters in particular for like track lighting, those again severely limit the number of and the types of smart bulbs you can buy. So there's basically one company that I might be able to buy from as far as working with the same app, the same Tuya Smart Life app. It's all so early, and I really should just wait. This is interesting. It looks like YouTube is doing a different live logo now when people are live. The other thing I certainly could talk about is the YouTube shorts are just getting ridiculous amounts of views. I think I might have close to 900 views in the first couple of hours for one of my YouTube shorts. Maybe 600, whatever. I mean, the numbers kind of don't even matter because you need millions to potentially be viable to monetize that way, and you still need 1,000 subscribers. But I also am getting subscribers fairly quickly too, so that there is hopefully a snowball effect here. Although at this rate, if it was just consistent and not a snowball, it'd still probably take a year and a half minimum before I would hit 1,000 subscribers and enough watch time, and potentially, this guy is just taking his sweet time. Potentially by the time I would just be about ready to be monetized in a year and a half from now, I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube once again changes the rules. They're going to change the rules on some level every single year right around January. That is clearly their way of reducing expenses, is to change the rules and get rid of YouTube content creators in large swaths. And once they run out of pretenses, at some point they are just going to say, we're going to kick out people we don't like. We're just going to pick people and potentially just pick people at random. So, yeah. But it's nice to see it get a lot of views, and nice to get subscribers and just see real progress there. But one of the things with the YouTube Shorts, since that was a pretty automated process, and I'm definitely still just learning about what I should highlight and what I shouldn't, I highlighted Madden 23, and someone, and honestly, I just don't know how to deal with a lot of these interactions when people put comments on the shorts in particular. It is at least a step down as far as quality comments, which is understandable. Like, the YouTube Shorts I'm making are, in my opinion, 20 steps at least down in quality compared to my pre-recorded footage or even live streams. But it's no surprise there. Plus, they're just really short and glib YouTube Shorts anyways, because they can only be a minute, so it's not surprising that people would only make short and glib comments, if anything. So somebody was, I guess, thinking they were calling me out in a certain way, or just trying to figure out why I was highlighting Madden 23, and then I kind of had to scramble to figure out why did Madden 23, which I don't pay any attention to at all, any of the Madden games, why did it show up on my feed as far as a new game on Steam, or newly updated game on Steam? And I don't really have just a default answer typed out as far as a reply. Obviously, there's going to need to be some kind of auto response set up of some sort, even if it is just me copying and pasting the same auto responses, because there's since the title is like, check out this game, that there are people that are just like saying, what about it, or like it's a direct conversation that I'm having here, instead of that just being the title that I picked because it seemed to work very well on YouTube. But yeah, Madden 23 recently updated in December, and that's why it showed up, and then has since recently updated again, so Season 3 on Madden 23 has just started. And in general, I usually do show games that people have missed, but in that case, the updates may have been missed, or, you know what, Madden 23 is about the most mainstream as you can go as far as games, so being called out as it being mainstream and not really needing to be shown off is not 100% inaccurate, but also I'm still going to do it. I'm going to show off big games because those big games, A, got that conversation to happen, and more comments by far are better for more interaction, and B, it got a lot of views. So a tentpole game like Madden 23 being spotlighted in my YouTube Shorts brings more eyes in front of all the other games. It's not particularly that much of a competition. But yeah, I need better responses, canned responses there. I need to think them up. I also have tried to experiment with having just like Paint open with a green image in full screen mode, so that I could potentially capture just the mouse cursor. That way the blur would capture, when we do the blur looking at games on Steam, I would have an unblurred version of the mouse cursor over the image that is being blurred, by having two apps open at the same time and overlaying them, and then chroma keying out the green with the green screen. And it wasn't working, but I just really didn't have time to mess with it. So I'll try to mess with it some more. Inherently, I need some kind of application that OBS can capture and capture the mouse cursor of first to show a picture. And then I probably need to automate just my setup as far as launching a bunch of applications, like the text crawl at the top here. Like I have to launch that twice and set everything up before I stream, and I do that all manually, and I really should just automate that whole process since there's several applications all opening at the same time. And as far as the hotkey, which was messed up in the last stream, it turns out if you hit Control and then any number on the keyboard, it will take you to that tab. So, like, Control 1 was what I was trying to do to undo the blur, and it took me to the first tab. So yeah, I just changed it to Control backtick and Alt backtick, because that doesn't do anything with Firefox. Let's start going through the news though. Like that was still 20 minutes of me doing an accountability section when I said I was gonna not do the accountability section. Let's see. Spider-Man 2 star claims a massive, astonishing sequel is on track for a 2023 release. Voice actor says Insomniac is confident about its launch window. I think we had already really talked about that. Life is Strange 2 coming to Nintendo. We talked about that also. Still very weird that they put any effort in Life is Strange 2. Square Enix, I imagine, probably just looking for a bump in sales that quarter. I wouldn't be surprised if they put it out and it plays pretty poorly, even for a game that really shouldn't have any struggle played at all. Let's see. You want this yellow one, I think. So what I want to do is attack here, see if that triggers anything. Interestingly, it didn't. Okay. Then let's do that. And end the turn. I wanted the blue, I guess, after all. Life is Strange 2 set a weird precedent where the Life is Strange series is not sticking with the main characters from the first Life is Strange and Life is Strange Beyond the Storm. Now, arguably, I do think when Life is Strange 2 came out, I said it probably, as a game, has a slightly better chance of them telling a more natural story, considering it was like two Canadian guys that was writing the story of Life is Strange 1, and two Canadian guys writing a story of two high school girls was weird. But then Life is Strange 2 is just two, like, illegal immigrant children, Mexican, Central American children, so it's still two Canadian guys really not telling a story that makes much sense to them. I would have definitely leaned more towards betting that Life is Strange 2 would be allowed to just disappear and be forgotten. Trek to Yomi will be released for the Nintendo Switch next week. This might be also a case if we start to see a bunch of games getting released for the Switch relatively quickly out of the blue. This might be notification that big partners have been told that the Switch is going to be replaced with a Switch 2. Yeah. And I would kind of believe that, certainly. Like, that definitely does feel very believable that... So I am yawning. Yeah, my insomnia is not doing great at all today either. Yeah, that news recently that they were going to scale up to making more Switches may very well quickly turn into actually we're making Switch 2s and we've told our partners, and that's why all these Switch 1 games are going to be released and pushed out as it's entering an end of cycle. It would be interesting if they scaled to something more like a Switch Lite, something that's even cheaper, and through that process is actually... Why can I not summon this? Like, not as compatible. That might be another reason why you would rush out towards releasing your game, is if there was a Switch Lite that could only play a smaller selection of games, but was, say, $100 to $150. If it had just like even weaker CPU stuff. That would be insanely weird, though, to go in that direction. Right. The only thing I think I could do here is hope that somehow I could summon this, and then with this, activate it. Or summon something in defense mode. Nope, that wasn't even what that trap did. That trap gives you a card later on, in 2 turns. Let's see, The Last of Us 3 Episode 3 trailer introduces Bill and Frank. I don't know who Bill and Frank are. Basically, they're going to talk about every episode of The Last of Us as long as it is still popular, and it's going to just spoil the game more and more. I've seen this guy before as a TV actor, and definitely I would say, and I think I mentioned this last stream, it's very crazy how just clean these bullet casings look as far as shotgun shells. And if you look at the gun itself, it also feels very polished and clean. So unless this was like day 1 of the apocalypse, you would think it would be dirtier. It seems to me like this is in the flashback sequence and this is in the future sequence. At this point, I am going to just actively close tabs and not talk about Last of Us episodes. I will, I guess, mention it if we hit a point where they go downhill. But if everything is just going great, we should just leave it. Inherently, had I talked about Game of Thrones for some reason, every single episode that Game of Thrones did for the first 4 or 5 seasons before the bad final wrap-up happened, there would have just been a massive amount of talk and a massive amount of hype for very little reason. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles, VGC, says Microsoft has subpoenaed PlayStation for its defense against the FTC lawsuit. That is a very different way of phrasing it than the way game developers seem to phrase it last stream, in which they said Xbox or Microsoft was asking for Sony's help. First of all, you are not asking for somebody's help when you're subpoenaing somebody. You are, through the power of the law, forcing them to come and testify, and then they very much can be a hostile witness or an unwilling witness that yeah, you would then use try to force that hostile witness to reveal whatever truth you wanted to reveal. And I would assume at the heart of it they are going to try and force Sony to reveal that they've had some kind of documentable conversations that says they don't really feel like it's a big concern that Microsoft would acquire Activision Blizzard, and that they're just doing this out of spitefulness or tortious interference even. Or you're going to get them to potentially respond on very broad terms as far as facts to try to build a case. Something I imagine the lawyer might do is just say, so Sony Interactive Entertainment is a subsidiary of Sony and only makes up less than 10% of Sony's total sales and profits. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I'm just picking a number out of thin air. But if all of a sudden you can say, well, actually, Sony is small, you could embarrass them, or you could prove that they don't so desperately need the PlayStation. Of course, you might very well, in fact, even more likely, they would go the other direction and say that, prove that Sony is super profitable with PlayStation division and would be super profitable regardless of whether they acquire Activision Blizzard. This again is one of those boring preliminary court things that don't lead towards any real information that matters. Yeah, so best case scenario, you'll have a 1 year to 4 to 10 year court case with Microsoft, and they might have like one interesting court day where some big reveal happens if you follow a bunch of YouTubers that follow court cases, and that's like the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is this will just take forever and lead to absolutely nothing. It's definitely not going to be like the Alex Jones trial, where there was a lot of coverage and a lot of ridiculous things that have happened, and Alex Jones will be back in court. I'm sure he's probably already back in court for a different trial in a different state. One bit of information as far as mainstream video game journalism that honestly I don't know if it's even worth talking about mainstream video game journalism anymore. But Jeff Gerstmann, formerly of Giant Bomb, who apparently came out, and this news didn't even get published enough that I had heard it, but he apparently came out about a month ago, and in his terrible live streams that he's running himself, he basically said that he was fired from Giant Bomb, the company he co-founded, not for any real stupid reason this time that people might have rallied behind him. Honestly, I doubt too many people would have rallied behind him a second time anyways, had he been the exact same Jeff Gerstmann that people rallied behind the first time he was fired. Because the first time he was fired, certainly because he pissed off a game company, and there was just no actual ethics there as far as the GameSpot company, like not backing up their news reporters. But he was fired 3 weeks before he was going to quit anyways, which I assume is just that he gave them 3 weeks, and was going to do like the Game Awards, which was basically E3 at the time because E3 wasn't happening, and that was going to just be the last of his footage, and that would be his last hurrah. And the people that own Giant Bomb decided probably not to take his 3 weeks and just fired him immediately. Or they got some word that he was leaving and fired him preemptively. But he is definitely saying he got fired 3 weeks before he was going to quit, which is a funny way to phrase it if you really had already put in your 3 weeks. Now, the only reason I even heard about it now is because the company that owns Giant Bomb and GameStop and had bought just a bunch of those whiskey media type things, although GameSpot was never whiskey media. All of those have been bought by Red Ventures at some time, and then they were sold again to a third company, and each time they've been sold, it's for less and less money. But whoever owns Giant Bomb now fired off 2 more people from Giant Bomb, which, I mean, I can't really even care about it. I really can't, because I didn't like any of the people that they had tried to bring in and what they're trying to do. So, yeah, I doubt Giant Bomb will ever have a full death. There will always just be some site, some forum where people can still hang out on, and that'll stay around long enough. You look at like Comic Vine, where I'm not sure that there's actually even a single person doing any new content for Comic Vine, and otherwise there just being like one person that like moderates the Comic Vine forums, and that's pretty much where I imagine Giant Bomb could go, is that you just will have them get rid of the podcasts, get rid of the videos, and just become Giant Bomb's own little forum in database. But it'll be a slow bleeding action, I'm sure. Just ever so slowly. More and more being bled out. Yep. The thing, though, about Jeff Gerstmann, even thinking about quitting, though, is he really obviously had no plan and hadn't thought anything out, and I just don't think he's a good leader of himself. So how in the world could I think he was a good leader of other people even when he was running Giant Bomb? Like, he probably, Jeff Grossman probably is the number one reason why Giant Bomb is in such a sorry state now, is that he's just, over the years of him being in charge, allowed it to fall apart more and more, and was just treating it as a group of friends instead of like having any kind of strategy or any kind of business like thinking patterns. If he did have any real leadership skills, then I really have to question why he didn't want to get back together with Nextlander, or at least cross promote with Nextlander a lot more, and why he is just this person on an island. And I suppose it is Jeff Grossman saying that he got fired, so he could be coloring the story very favorably. I mean, it really does sound like one of those lies people will say, is that I got fired 3 weeks before I quit. Like, it's very possible he's just had a breakdown in his relationship with everybody else, and that's why he's not working with Nextlander or anybody else, and just doesn't have any connections to anybody. I also went back and looked at Nextlander, and they're making videos, but they're not really covering new games. So they really don't have a lot of relevancy to me in what they're doing. And so I've finally been able to actually pull the plug and just get my podcast RSS feed reader to stop downloading the Bombcast. It has been 3 or 4 weeks since I've even listened to a single episode of the Bombcast, so I think I've... Okay, I'm back. My computer just had to reboot there, and I'll have to look at what that is. Meanwhile, I'm going to have to just reload everything. And Windows is still just trying to boot up here. Like Firefox apparently also updated. I definitely was just sitting on a Windows Update reboot that I probably shouldn't have been sitting on, but I doubt that is the thing that caused my computer to reboot. It says page fault error, so I have to kind of question that it wouldn't be OBS itself that caused that problem. And we'll just try our best here to set everything back up. And then I also just need to move forward. Also have to fix the video if I can, otherwise that footage is just lost forever. And just a lot of setup in general. It did like reboot right as I was trying to do the web peak here, and that's broken. So I wouldn't be surprised if what happened there is that did trip it. Like, I need to move over to the next step. The next version of OBS in particular. That way, maybe we could fix one of the problems of the display numbering moving around. It could have been Yu-Gi-Oh! Too. Like, it could have been anything. Like, I'm hoping, and I don't think I have a problem with my computer that's anything related to the problem I had in the past, but you never know. That really hurt me last year, though, as far as just really it felt like months of computers breaking and just making me upset because the computer was breaking and having to struggle to figure out what the heck was even wrong because it was such a weird issue that turned out to be the trusted platform module just could not be enabled on my computer without it eventually breaking RAM or seemingly breaking, short-circuiting RAM. Which, that is a really weird and rare issue, certainly when you have software that is breaking physical hardware. Alright, well, let's, and I hope the stream is actually streaming, but who knows. There may have been too much time in between. I may have decided to start a new stream. HBO claims The Last of Us enjoyed a record audience growth for a second episode. Viewers were up 22% in the largest jump ever for an HBO original drama series. Now, I wonder if Game of Thrones would have been classified as an original drama series. But yeah, 22% up is big numbers. Of course, may not be that big of numbers. It's a big percentage, but I could see the viewership being as low as 1 million, probably closer to 10 million viewers. It's not like there's a lot of people watching TV, and particularly it's not like there's a massive amount of people watching HBO. Let's see. Again, in an effort to save time, I probably need to stop playing fairly quickly on Yu-Gi-Oh! That is another thing, is I should be playing a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, and I'm not. Moving on. Let's burn through this. Blizzard lead quits the company in protest of a toxic, quote-unquote toxic staff appraisal system. Brian Birmingham was reportedly forced to give some employees poor grades. At a certain level, and maybe this just shows that I wouldn't be the best manager in these larger corporate structures. I'm not sure I agree with the idea of using a numbered system to grade employees or stacked ranking system to grade employees in general. I just think that feels very much like school, and personally I think a lot of the school systems are, the systems within schools are stupid and dumb and just bad. I could certainly see some hardcore scientific metrics being used, and that there might be a system around that would be somewhat fair. Like, if an employee was tardy, maybe that gives like a demerit system. Certain number of demerits, you're automatically written up and fired at that point. That'd probably be about the best way to do it. But the idea of having a demerit system in a job is really just to weed out the worst of the worst employees and just give a lot of job security and confidence to everybody who's an average employee and better. When you get into stack ranking, it just is trying to force all of your employees to crunch and do more. It's clearly in that crunch culture where you're having employees have to work against each other or compete against each other to just keep their jobs, and it's just ridiculous, and particularly for game development. Like when you're talking coding, if somebody writes 1,000 bad lines and one person writes one good line, you probably want to keep the person that writes one good line of code. Whereas managers that don't know any better may just go, well, this guy wrote 1,000 very simplistic bad lines of code, so they're better. I would definitely put this, since you can even see that VGC is talking about a better ABK, Activision Blizzard King. This is just more push to reveal how terrible Activision Blizzard has been. But notably, this has been kind of an open secret amongst at least mainstream video game journalists, and they just have not been talking about it. So I can't help but to feel like mainstream video game journalists were getting bribed at some level to not discuss the problems at Activision Blizzard in favor of getting access to Modern Warfare, in favor of thinking that they might be protecting people's jobs or their friends at Activision Blizzard King. I can't help but feel like, since there is no investigative journalism that would whistleblow, really, or there hasn't been any of that in previous years, and this is really a thing that's started to only happen in the last 4 or 5 years, and as we're starting to move into just everybody kind of at least admitting that the anti-work or anti-bad jobs movement is a thing, and it's a thing that's going to stay around. Nowadays, it seems like people are willing to report on it, whereas these problems have probably been around for decades and should have been reported on much earlier in small measures to cause small controversies and perhaps manageable small changes to Activision Blizzard. Whereas now, there is really no hope for ABK because they basically need to be acquired by Microsoft, then completely reorganized to get rid of most of the toxic management, most of the toxic policies. Really, Microsoft would best be to acquire the entire company, lay off everybody, and then hire back anybody that could possibly work with them without some kind of controversy or toxic attitude. And there very possibly is nobody at Activision Blizzard King anymore that doesn't have a toxic attitude, because if it's just been that bad that long, anybody that isn't going to get pulled down into the mud, whether it's an associate or a manager, probably left a long time ago. Moving on, VGC says Ubisoft hires the Battlefront 2 creative director to shape social interactions in its future games. That could be a good thing, but it definitely doesn't sound great. At a certain level, it could be putting in more social features into their games, or it could also just be running their Twitter and social media channels. At a certain point, he's the editorial VP. it almost isn't newsworthy to talk about somebody being hired at a new company. You wouldn't talk about that if it was a brand new person that didn't have any kind of pedigree or former work history. That'd be ridiculous to have an article where it's where they're saying that a brand new out of college person has just been hired. It might be nice for that employee, certainly, but that would be about it. Let's activate this. You have to use the spells to summon these, which is a major limitation. But doing that right now allows me to draw a card. Which, maybe it's not valuable enough to draw a card, but whatever. And this can only attack twice if it destroys a minion the first time. But I guess it's worth pointing out that this is the former Dead Island 2 design director, which is not even a good credit, because Dead Island 2 was not the good Dead Island anyways. Let's see. Atlas has added 5 Persona soundtracks to a streaming services. Which streaming services? Various music streaming services. Okay. Yeah. I think we will start to see more of this happen. It probably won't be a heavy movement or a huge movement that way, but certainly with the pandemic, even making and pressing audio CDs probably got a little bit more expensive and a little bit slow, and we are long past the point in which selling physical CDs has become irrelevant and passé. Even in Japan, I doubt there are too many people that are looking to collect audio CDs. Now, there are still vinyl freaks out there that will get vinyls, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a resurgence of vinyl soundtracks for video games. And there still is going to be a push for limited edition collectibles, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few more soundtracks included in limited edition boxes for video games. But even now, there's a decent number of LE boxes that don't have CDs in them and instead have other kinds of collectibles, whether it's posters, pencil boards, art books. Arguably, it is probably more expensive to press a CD than it is to print an art book. Plus, there's just not CD-ROMs to put them in. Anyways, like, people don't need CD-ROM drives in their laptops, really, and a lot of laptops don't have CD-ROM drives. People don't really need CD players in their cars, although more than likely they still have a decent chance of having one. People aren't carrying around portable CD players, for sure. Let's see, moving on. Forspoken is getting a PC demo alongside today's release. I think Forspoken is already out at this point. If it's not, everything I'm hearing about it is it's falling completely flat. Inherently, it's no surprise. I just don't even know this character's name. I don't know anything about the story. I don't know anything about the world. They made pretty terrible trailers showing off gameplay mechanics that didn't even look that interesting. So it's no surprise that the whole thing fails miserably. It's the difference between if you were going to make a trailer for Skyrim today, you would make a trailer where they would say the word Dragonborn a lot. They would show fights with dragons over and over again. They'd show major plot points and conversations. They'd probably spoil major storyline fights that happen against the dragons. You would really focus on making a game that showed a lot of characters and implied that there was a big story, big narrative element to Skyrim, and try to make it feel like a movie trailer and play like, even though that's in a lot of ways not what Skyrim really is. If you think about how the kind of trailers for Fallout 4 were, where it's like war never changes, and it looks like a movie, that's probably something you would have wanted to see for Spoken too. And I totally know and pretty much kind of knew the plot point before even Fallout 4 came out, that it was somebody getting their child kidnapped after they'd been frozen after the nuclear war in the Fallout universe. So, yeah, having never played any of Fallout 4, even though someone so kindly gifted me the game, I still know the basic plot points. And inherently, the other thing I would say is that there just is not the right amount of visual flash and the right color palette here if you're going for visual flash. It's just too dark. It needed to be less Monster Hunter and more anime-esque, frankly, because that would have caught more people attention. Or they could have tried a completely different art style, but that would have been risky. Okay. I could draw either one of these, and I guess your best bet is probably to toss that. Not sure what that ability is going to do, other than maybe protect it from being destroyed. Darn it. Let's see. Riot says League of Legends source code has been stolen and is being held for ransom. I would assume League of Legends source code will be leaked at that point, regardless of whether they pay the ransom or not. Although, I'm not sure if you really need to steal the source code of any game to clone a game. It'd be easier, but it would be also legally risky. The studio says they're confident that no personal player data or personal info was compromised in a recent cyber attack. Yeah, they're always confident about that until they come back 6 months to 3 years later and say, oh, actually it was stolen. They've once again delayed the Lord of the Rings Golem game. Well, no. I guess more accurately, they delayed it to an unspecified date, and now it has a new launch window between April and September. This is the co-publisher by Nacom and Daedalic game, and I'm fairly happy for them to take as much time as they want, because I don't think people are really chomping at the bit to play this Golem game anyways, and it's better that they release a game that's actually good instead of just giving up and shoving it out there for nobody to like it. I'd rather it be good and have a small following versus it coming out earlier and having no following. Warhammer 40k Darktide seasonal content and Xbox release have been delayed. Fat Shark to spend the coming months addressing fan feedback following the game's PC release. I assume that this game was not received particularly well on PC. Well, no, it's not even on PC yet. So I'm assuming then it just wasn't received particularly well on whatever console it was released on. Yeah, there's a long list of poorly received like Warhammer games, so it would be nice if they'd improve that. I haven't seen anything new around the Dungeons and Dragons OGL situation. That wasn't video game related per se anyways, so it's not super surprising that I would stop talking about it anyways, but I do follow a YouTuber who covers console board games, and there is a Dungeons and Dragons Hero Click style game. It looks somewhat like Hero Quest, but just because I don't know really what Hero Clicks is, that is coming out or has been released recently, I'm not even sure, but it's like way too expensive, and he definitely pointed out that you could buy a Gloomhaven starter set which had a lot more going for it for the same price, and these board games are like $150 for starter sets plus then expansions. And then he also mentioned Pathfinder as a possible option. I will say though, from an outsider looking in, it did look more interesting certainly to have like plastic figurines, even if they're cheap plastic figurines, that you can move around the board like Hero Quest, then instead of really only having paper, which is what you would have in Dungeons and Dragons, is that you just have paper on top of paper. And sometimes you can add props, certainly when playing Dungeons and Dragons, but there aren't official props that are necessary or well known. I can't help but think I'm still losing quite a bit here. This is a surprising article from Video Games Chronicles. Xbox gaming revenue fell by 13% during the holiday quarter. A lack of new releases hit the gaming business in the 3 months ending in December. So, if anything, this is a great example of where if you're going to be a video games company, you need to sell games. You can't just sell hardware. Noticeably, though, there wasn't like any great sales during the Christmas Black Friday shopping season for Xbox. Like, I would have gotten a controller if they had a controller on sale. I could get a new controller every year and I would be fine. I would have certainly considered getting an Xbox Series X. You do have the problem certainly of the Series S just being driveless, so I don't think I'd ever buy that. But that's pretty much the only thing. I didn't win a single duel today, apparently. We need to do a duel live and one more duel in the theme exhibit, and that would be about it. Let's see. And I guess, how many of these do we have? We're below 100 here, so I'm not even going to open a pack right now. Sorry. Yeah. They also obviously didn't get new subscriptions or renewed subscriptions by at least 13%. So that's a problem too. Had there been more of a shortage for PlayStation 5s, they probably would have sold more Xboxes, but they definitely should not have planned for that. There should have been a higher push. Microsoft says Xbox monthly active users hit a record 120 million. Company also reports new highs for Game Pass subscriptions during its second quarter, which, yeah, I guess game sales are still way more profitable than subscriptions, if that's the case. And then this story has evolved. At a certain point, you still have to say that he's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, but Justin Roiland has resigned from the High on Life studio Squanch Games after facing, I think, actual legal domestic violence charges, not just accusations of it. So he's no longer, as the voice actor, being involved on High of Life or at Squanch Games. He has also been fired or let go from his voice acting elements on Rick and Morty. So that creates this weird situation now where the voice actor for Rick and Morty is potentially going to change. I wouldn't be super upset if they went back and redubbed all the voice acting in Rick and Morty to a different character. It would sound weird, but they could do that to have it consistently be the same throughout all the series, or they'll just hire a sound alike. I imagine there is a lot of people that could do voices that would sound like them, or they could potentially even use like deepfake voice AI technology for the voice acting. Also on Rick and Morty, I wouldn't be surprised if they let him go and then they bring him back. Yeah. Roland was reportedly arrested and released on a $50,000 bond in August of 2020. And he was arraigned in October 2020. He pled not guilty of the charges at the time. And so then he's still, I guess, possibly waiting for his day in court 2 years later. And obviously somebody should have known about this. If I was working in Hollywood, any personality, any celebrity, I would assume that their agents would probably tell people if they've been arrested, or you would have private investigators investigating everybody. If I was a production company, if I was with Adult Swim, I would have a private investigator just combing through all the court case files of every employee to get this information as quickly as possible. That's something that you would have HR do, I would imagine, is as part of HR, just constantly private investigating all your employees. But also, certainly, this is very much cancel culture, because nobody did anything and he didn't quit in 2020. This only became an issue until it became publicly known. AEW Fighting Forever release date is reported in limbo to the ESRB rating issues. The debut game from the wrestling firm was originally planned for a 2022 release. I wonder if there's one specific thing that's the problem, or if they're just pushing for a teen and can only get an M. Like, it would be kind of weird if they were getting an adults only as a wrestling game, unless there's something in it that is just weird. or particularly mature. A game called The Day Before has been delayed 8 months over an alleged trademark issues. The heavily wishlist MMO is now planned to be released in November. Trademark is an interesting issue, certainly. If it was really just a trademark issue, then that's just bad management, that they wouldn't have a backup name also going through the process or already approved. Like, you really don't need a trademark or even a copyright. Well, you don't have to really apply for copyrights until you sue somebody, is my understanding. So you could release a game under any name and then sue them for copyright later. If you want a trademark specifically around the name of a game, you would have to file that before. But I don't know if it's really worth doing that. It almost certainly isn't worth delaying your game to do it. Moving on, Destiny 2 has been offline for more than half a day due to progress tracking issues. I'm losing momentum in Steam here. The Last of Us Season 2 is likely, says Bella Ramsey. There's nothing confirmed yet, the Ellie actor stresses. No. I still am, I guess, old-fashioned in that I feel like actors should be referred to as actresses if they present as female, but yeah, we really should just move towards genderless terms and in the English language. It'll make learning the English language a lot better, a lot easier. Apparently, it has been confirmed that GoldenEye 007 will release for Switch and Xbox this week. The Switch Online version will feature online play. I don't know if GoldenEye 007 on the Switch is going to be released in physical form. Since you almost certainly would want online play too. This is definitely a game I still feel like is going to end up disappointing a lot of people with nostalgia when they start to actually try and play it. It's just not going to feel right, or it's going to feel exactly like GoldenEye felt like, and people are just going to realize that GoldenEye controlled with a very weird controller. Remember, you would have been using that three-handled Nintendo 64 controller originally for GoldenEye with a terrible analog stick, which was nowhere as precise. And now you're going to be controlling it with the Joy-Cons, which those aren't particularly good either. So the whole game's just going to feel weird. The button layout for GoldenEye was pretty crazy compared to modern layouts. There is also something to be said about there really not being any nostalgia for this movie at this point. I couldn't even name who these female characters are in the movie. And I could only tell you the general gist of what I think GoldenEye was about, which was, I think, controlling satellites that could maybe shoot lasers down. But yeah, of the 4 scenes here being shown from the movie, the planes here in the satellite dish, I kind of remember. I can't even tell you what that is. This is obviously his car, and I guess this is a lady on a beach, as best I can tell. If anything, I would say Pierce Brosnan, while he was a major contender for one of the best James Bonds back in the day, he's lost some relevance in that he just hasn't done anything recently. He's probably retired, pretty old, I'd imagine. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says how to watch the Xbox Bethesda Developer Direct live stream. It kicks off, I guess, tonight. um, at these different times, 12 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. So it may very well be happening right now. I doubt too much is even going to be said or talked about during it, though, so whatever. The delayed version of Football Manager for the PS5 has received a new release date. What's the release date now? February 1st. And then we'll skip the bookmarked article and move over to the Gamatsu. Gamatsu still talking about a possible Cosmic Smash revival, whatever Cosmic Smash is, as this Sega teaser site is being shown. The Dark Pictures, is this the same as the Dark Pictures anthology? Switchback VR has been delayed to March 16th, no longer due out on February 22nd. This looks like a horror game in VR. A city builder game called SteamWorld Build has been announced for basically everything. Another game in that weirdly named SteamWorld series that really always seems like it's a different style of game, just in with the same name. Maybe SteamWorld is a bit of a theme, like a steampunk theme. Honkai Star Rail Final has a closed beta test for February 10th. If you want to check out that article. Let's see. Volzark Monsters and Lands Unknown for iOS and Android is now available in Japan. Also, update, there's a PC version now available too. This looks like they have made a Genshin Impact clone. It doesn't look terrible. Maybe closer to Monster Hunter in some elements too. Let's see. Colopole releases a tech demo adventure game called Principles for iOS and Android in Japan, which the idea of them even talking about a tech demo is a little weird. Yeah. One thing about when you have like a tech demo here is that all that's really confirming to you is that this character, if you grow to love them or grow to love her, will never show up in any other game, and so you'll just never see this art style, you'll never see this character, you'll never see this world, and the only thing you really are testing is just the like visual rendering effects and particle effects and physics effects. And here you can see them showing off, in particular, a magic explosion of crates. And then here's showing off lighting effects. And this is just like terrain displaying and lighting. It's just really not worth it for people to play tech demos and for them to release it so publicly if it is a tech demo. Unless their idea is that they're going to be the new Unreal Engine, which, good luck on that. Disgaea has yet another trailer, and here we can see a whole collection of characters from Disgaea. I was hoping we'd stop getting Disgaea news with the release of Disgaea. Yggdra Union Will Never Fight Alone is coming to PC in early access on February 6th worldwide. This is a new game to me. Interesting. It definitely feels like a Nintendo DS game of some sort that's being re-released based on the visuals. But I'm not sure it's really not a brand new game. Yeah, it was first launched on the Game Boy Advance in 2006 and then has been just ported quite a bit. But even at that, I still have never heard of it. Empire of Ants game launches in 2024 for consoles and PC. It's perhaps a little too early to be announcing games coming out a year later. Visually this looks interesting, but would you really want to play as an insect surrounded by other insects, the gameplay mechanics are going to be kind of boring and the visuals are going to be kind of creepy. Even if you can try to make them look bright and colorful, in a lot of cases you're still going to have spiders and termites and cockroaches and ants and everything. Curse of the Sea Rats launches April 6th as a game. Let's see. It's a Metroidvania side-scrolling action platformer, according to this. It definitely has the visual look of one of those rat movies that Disney made a long time ago. I think Disney made those movies. Those were weird. It's always weird when that there is a small populace of people who are obsessed with anthropomorphic mice and rats that just love that book. If you give a mouse a cookie, basically. This is coming out for basically everything. I feel like that audience that liked mice and rats and things like that are probably split now with people who are furries and who aren't furries. And so I imagine that audience is even smaller in newer generations. Stealth strategy game The Shadow Gambit, The Cursed Crew, has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. How does it play? Well, these screenshots are really not showing me much, but I have to assume it's a stealth combat, XCOM type game. What's interesting is, and I don't even know how I found this. I was searching something on my Roku TV, and it suggested to me a completely different channel app that I've never used, because inside of it was an app for a Stargate game. Yeah, I was looking to see if you could see the Stargate movies, like the Ark of Truth, and where you could stream that. And it popped up this long developer presentation about a Stargate XCOM stealth game that looks somewhat similar to this that's in development. Noticeably, though, of my sources, I don't obviously have enough sources for news. Although I also don't want to get bogged down in trying to seek out other news stories. I had not heard anything about this Stargate game in development. But allegedly it's an officially licensed product, so it might actually get developed and finished and released. Of course, there almost is this curse around anything Stargate that there's always rumors and things being worked on, but they never come to fulfillment because the people who own the rights to Stargate don't really want to release anything. A game called Saga of Sins launches March 30th. It's a side-scrolling action-adventure game for PS4, PS5, Switch, and Xbox Series and PC, but not Xbox One. The visuals here look kind of interesting. And it's going for this like stained glass look to it. Yeah, it does seem somewhat interesting. I don't have time to go to watch any of these trailers though. Journey to the Savage Planet is coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series on February 14th. Yeah, every game company that has anything that might even feel a little bit like the ZeniMax Starlink game needs to release their games quickly before Starlink comes out, because once we have Skyrim in space with Starlink, which is what we're assuming Starlink is going to be, or I'm assuming that, there's definitely going to be severely less opportunity for a game like this to be purchased. This is a free upgrade, by the way, for existing owners who own the games on the PS4 or the Xbox Ones. We already talked about Warhammer Dark Tide delaying its stuff. There's a quote here: "We fell short of meeting players' expectations." Players being added here by Komatsu, and may not be what they really meant. They may have fell short of the expectations of the publisher. Winning Post 10 has a debut trailer. This is a horse racing game from Koei Tecmo. K-Non, not to be confused with K-On, for the Switch, launches April 20th in Japan. I assume this is a visual novel. The Day Before for PC has been delayed to November 10th. 8 months delay due to a trademark dispute. I guess the game must have been released on something. No, doesn't seem like. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's been released to anything yet. So they're just fighting trademarks. Dragon Quest: The Adventures of Dai, A Hero's Bond is going to end service on April 26th. I assume this is probably a smartphone game that never even came to the West. As far as Dragon Quest games, this doesn't even really look like a Dragon Quest game in my mind. Caverns of Mars Recharged has been announced for everything, due out March 9th. It looks like it's a kind of shoot 'em up game, or a top-down twin-stick shooter game, maybe closer to a top-down twin-stick shooter. Football Manager 2023 console for PS5 launches February 1st, according to Komatsu. NIS, or Nippon Ichi Software, has a 30th anniversary live stream set for January 30th, in which I'm sure they will possibly announce some new projects or celebrate Disgaea 7. GoldenEye 007 coming out for the Switch and Xbox Series and Xbox One on January 27th. Visuals here, very low polygon. Remnant from the Ashes for the Switch launches March 21st. Story of Seasons: A Wonderful Life launches June 27th in the West. Did I even say today's date was Wednesday, January 25th? I'll throw it out there. A romance visual novel, Fuyakara Kuraru, is coming to the PS4 and Switch on May 25th in Japan. And then Fortress S launches April 27th in Japan. Fortress S being what? A strategy shooter of some sort. How's that really play? Doesn't really want to show much. Seems like you maybe are playing as tanks and then targeting, maybe targeting towards the background more than just sideways. Mostly seems like it's a Worms type game. Yeah, where you're just sideways targeting people. Alright. And so that's going to bring us to games that have come out on Steam. So I'm going to hit my shortcut key, but since my computer program changed, I wouldn't be surprised if none of my settings that I changed actually stuck since my computer rebooted. So we may just be showing the setup that existed before I made some tweaks. Like, one of the things that I tried to tweak here, and it's hard to tell whether that's stuck or not, is by not scaling the resolution down as much, basically making it twice the width and height, or 4 times the number of pixels, that I was shrinking the image down before stretching it back up. That would be a quarter the size of the pixeling for the pixelated images, which once we get into like adult content, maybe that's not going to work, because we may very well be not blurring enough here. Here we have a example in this horror game of a monster looking character. When you get into the blur, it's much more recognizable. However, you still have no way of possibly making out the logo on the right, top right, or the text at the top left. So it would be nicer if I could just figure out a way to blur images specifically on the page using some kind of extension, but even that would be a slow process. I'd have to toggle some kind of button, and yeah, it probably wouldn't work. No. Now also, if I would ever show an adult video cut trailer, the motion would probably undo the blurring and work with the blurring a lot better. This kind of pixely low GPU processing blurring, I think, is in particular designed in the idea of motion moving around, that you get a lot more details with the blurring compared to a static image. And there almost certainly is technology these days that could undo a blur if you have video like this pretty well. Anyways, we'll stick with that, though it does seem to be working. This game, The Dark Side of Mars, though, feels too much like a horror asset flip for me to say yes to it. And then, let's see, we have Stella's Pointless Castle Awakening, which is visually different, but very possibly this is just a low effort game. But since I'm just really low on my standards for YouTube Shorts, I will definitely put it on the follow list, make a YouTube short around it. Same is true for Hexagon Puzzle Blocks. Low effort name. Also on top of all that, Metal March Beginner Experience. Looks interesting. I'm going to say yes to a lot of things, I imagine. Dodge It Online, I'll say no to. It is Wednesday, so it will very possibly run into adult games. Endless Runners. Do I want to make a YouTube short around an endless runner? Let's see. Well, honestly, this doesn't look terrible for an endless runner, so I'm going to make a YouTube short around that. One of the things I certainly could do is run my macro to make YouTube shorts after this stream. Like, as I'm busy with other things, now definitely would be the time to make those shorts, upload those shorts. Take the fact that I'm gonna have some downtime. Comatose is gonna be a no. Well, an unexpected guest. Yes. There is still this problem with YouTube Shorts covering games maybe months ahead. I haven't done any scheduling lately either. So scheduling and uploading, both reasonable things for me to do. Ideally, running my channel, I would like to just always be playing games and always making pre-recorded content. But increasingly, as I get old and tired and just busy doing other things, there are times, obviously, in which that just doesn't happen. And I should have a couple other things that I could do instead to keep myself busy and productive. I'm going to put this on the follow list even though it's already mixed. Um, but yeah, there's that they need to be actions that really are productive. I don't need just busy work. And naturally, there has been some extra things that are YouTube related now that does make a lot of sense for me to work on those every now and then. Shorts being a great example of that. Like, by default, I would never make YouTube shorts. I would say, no, I just hate it and be a stick in the mud. Should I make a YouTube short around this? I'm going to draw a line and say no on this. Even though this might do particularly well on YouTube, just making a short around what is basically a low effort game, I have to say no. We have Neptunia Sisters vs. Sisters, now available on PC. It's already rated very positively. Arguably, maybe I should start with that series of Neptunia games, because that is feeling like that is the soft reboot of it. Is this a VR game? Yeah. I don't think I'm going to promote this, so give it a follow. Galahad 3093. I will say no to because it's already mixed. Venture Valley. Yeah, for every Madden game that I potentially cover, there are dozens of games like this. I'm not going to do YouTube short on that one either. So it does still really make a lot of sense to cover Madden. Let's see. Alright, so first adult game we have today, Pretty Hentai Girls. It's a slide puzzle. When I look here, yeah, you're getting blurring here, showing off the images of just pure nudity, but arguably the blurring is not enough. So what I probably am going to have to do is lower the resolution somewhere between half and double, and do like 1.5 times the amount of pixels, which that very possibly is going to make it more difficult to do the math. But yeah, this is arguably not censored enough, I imagine, for YouTube's taste. Like, showing a butt here is basically still just showing a butt. It's $1.69. This is going to be an interesting video going forward because of that too. I guess the best thing to do at that level would be to hit this and turn this back on. Yeah. And so we'll get rid of the blur for the rest of the stream. That way there's at least only one incident if YouTube wants to ding me, instead of throughout the entirety of the video covering every adult game with that blur. Moving on though, we still need to move quickly here. Is this an adult game? Let's see. Minhera Girls Assembly Needy Girlfriends. It's $19.99. I didn't say the price of that adult hentai slide puzzle game, but I guess it doesn't really matter. This is just a visual novel. And at a certain level, should I talk about visual novels and make a YouTube short around them? the problem is visual novels are already a niche. Anime is fairly mainstream, but I really wouldn't just know what's on these trailers in particular. So when I would make a YouTube short around it, the trailer video could be anything. In this case, it seems like it's mostly just centering around showing off a character. Now, inherently, that's true for any game that I make a short around. I'm not looking at the trailers. I can't speak at all to the quality of them, or what's in them. So, but it's a little too risky in any visual novel that there might be too many lewd effects. Here you have an anime girl just getting like lewd camera angles on them. Noticeably, this visual novel too has them in sweaters quite a bit to hide the fact that they're in a school uniform of some sort. Although, as far as mature content, it's psychological horror such as house arrest with scenes involving self-harm. So this is much more of a horror game than a lewd, like, romance sexual game, although every image here seems to play with that concept too. Moving on. Elder Tale Prologue. I'm gonna skip it because it's a prologue. Super Kids Racing Mini Edition doesn't look like it's good enough. Bad Cat Sam. This game I think was on early access earlier. I swear I've seen this game before, but it says it's brand new. So maybe there was a different game very similar, different cat with a different name perhaps. This Berserker Monsters in Lands Unknown. In this case, I would say yes if it supported the English language, but it doesn't at the moment. It's only Japanese. A trailer like this, I have a lot more confidence as far as it not going too wild while still having that same anime visuals. Bus driving simulator, I think we can say no to. There probably is a very tight trick as far as the YouTube shorts around pissing people off or intriguing people enough that they would comment, and then going way too far and really pissing off everybody. Yeah. Or going way too mainstream and just making everybody happy to the point where they stop being interested in looking at them at the YouTube shorts because they're all games people already have heard about. Linus Tech Tips, Linus Media Group, is talked about on their podcast, which I've started listening to their podcast more than Giant Bomb or any video game podcasts. They're talking about starting a React channel, and they're talking around the ethics of React channels, which there's something there that's interesting as a content creator to listen to. This next game is interesting. I would have sworn that this was an adult game. Forest of Relics. You just got really glistening cleavage here, and yet it seems like this really is just more of a kind of low polygon platforming experience, which doesn't look terrible, but seems to asset flipped Lara Croft wannabe characters and sell on the sex. But you can definitely, seems to me like it's a little blurry here in this still image in particular. Just feels a little low resolution. It's $2.99, and the mature content warrior, there are costumes with high exposure. High exposure covers when playable characters move to break through traps, underwear exposure, butt close-ups, and so on. So, high exposure is an interesting phrase I've not heard before. To potentially just say you might see cleavage and midriff and upskirts and underwear. It's an interesting thought, though. I'm going to put this on the fall list just to see how people respond to it, but I'm not going to do a YouTube short around it, because also it feels like it's just a low effort game. A little asset flippy too. And then these other games often don't have anything to say. It still feels weird that there's... This is one of those house repair things. Although in this case it seems to be being a handyman and repairing things more than just totally flipping a house. Which there's a slight difference there, I guess. Although in general being a handyman isn't as common as it once was. Like, you don't really hire handymans as much as you hire professionally insured plumbers, electricians, construction employees. You can get cheaper by hiring handymans in a lot of situations, but you also then run the risk of them doing things wrong or not fixing it if they do it the right way. But then also there's an assumption in that if you hire a professional electrician or plumber or whatever, that you would get it correctly done on the first place in that case too, and that's not really true either. There's a high number of skilled tradesmen that just don't do good jobs. Legend of Heroes, Kuro no Kisekai Crimson Scent, Kuro no Kisekai 2. That deserves a YouTube short because that's a big game. David Slade Mysteries, Case Files. I'll do that, but this requires VR. Am I promoting VR games? I don't think I am. I'll put it on the fall list. Pets Hotel, a prologue. I'd say no to that, but there is an interesting idea around a simulator of a pet hotel. So I'm going to put it on the fall list for my own personal desire. I would like... I definitely had a fantasy at one point of working in a pet hotel type thing, but the reality of that versus the fantasy of that is very different. The fantasy is that it would be all just playing with pets and everybody would be friendly and happy, and that no dog would be covered in ticks or poo and pee, and that they wouldn't be making messes all over the place, and they wouldn't fight each other, and they would all just play well together. The reality of that is all of the things I just named are factors to the job, and it is a job that even if you got it, you probably wouldn't get paid much. Moving on, we're at the GameDeveloper.com articles. Tunic and Betrayal at Club Low are frontrunners for IGF's nominations. Do they have a full list of nominations? Apparently so. If you want to check this out, although at a certain point I'd say just check it out yourself if you're interested, because I don't feel like the IGF awards even matter. Proletariat has withdrawn the election for unionization and cites the CEO as a cause. The CEO, Seth Sivek, allegedly used tactics that stopped the Proletariat Workers Union from pursuing a unionization vote. How the CEO could do that is incredibly weird and crazy, But if the CEO could find a way to do that, it must be so blatantly obvious and bad to do it, that to stop vote for unionization, that it's probably going to backfire. Like, if the CEO could get away with stopping unionization votes in their company, every CEO definitely would do that. This is another CWA, Communication Workers of America, statement given to Kotaku. They allege the CEO used, quote, confrontational tactics to dissuade workers from forming a union. It's claimed that they held a series of meetings that demoralized and disempowered the group from making a free and fair election impossible. But see, they announced they were making a union in December of 2022. And Proletariat said they wouldn't willingly recognize a union. In a lot of ways, though, this always happens when a union is being formed, is that all of a sudden people come in and make ridiculous claims and have these ridiculous anti-union meetings. And if all of a sudden somebody you've never even heard of is coming up from a district office to your company, or coming from a different department, and you've just never met this person, and then they're giving you this speech about why unions are bad, that's obviously going to be propaganda, but it can be very effective, certainly. That is definitely a union busting tactic. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes, because what this feels like to me is happening, and this is just not really being explained well, is that the Proletariat Workers Alliance Union, or proto-union working towards becoming a union, has withdrawn the election for unionization because they've gotten the message that they wouldn't succeed. It doesn't feel like Proletariat as the corporation has somehow withdrawn the election. And they're definitely putting all the blame on the CEO. Yeah, it's definitely not going to be a smooth process towards unionization. And while it is, it is the right direction to go to see the game industry unionize, it really should just be a stepping stone towards a lot of other industries unionizing for the average person with their average job, that definitely need union protections a lot more because they're severely underpaid. They don't have the benefits. It's really hard to support rich people becoming unions just so that they don't have to work as much in the game industry when they're getting $60,000 to $200,000 a year, compared to somebody who's making $20,000, $40,000 a year and just struggling to get by. Let's see. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com says Kickstarter's 2022 tabletop campaigns dipped in funding, but had a high success ratio. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a lot more Kickstarters that are particularly around not playing Dungeons and Dragons. Tabletop gaming in particular, though, would be a hard Kickstarter to deliver on, with all of the cardboard you'd have to ship and deliver. That's not particularly video game related. Among Us VR has hit 100 million copies sold, which, if anything, that really just goes to point out that there is no VR gaming industry that really exists when you have one of the most prevalent and popular games like Among Us hitting 1 million. that is not a big number. Squanch Games CEO Justin Rowland exited the studio after felony charges. We already talked about that. Xbox hardware and content revenue is in decline. That is a little bit of yellow journalism, a little bit of propaganda, certainly. Saying in decline implies that it is continuing to be in decline when you don't really know that, and implying that it will continue, which you can't really say that. The better way, more accurate way to say it certainly is that hardware revenue declined by 13% year over year. Year on year is a weird phrase. I've only ever heard year over year. Let's see. 4A Games is handing the Metro Exodus SDK over to players. The Ukrainian studio also detailed how the Russian invasion continues to impact their lives on its employees. Them potentially handing over the Metro Exodus software development kit does really imply that they have a real fear that they won't be a business after a while, and they'd rather just let the player base make games that feel like Metro and look like Metro, versus it just being bombed out of existence, or all the employees being drafted into a war, drugged into a war. Speaking of the Russian war, there's a lot of laughter, deservedly so, against Russia as far as just how ineffective their military machines and their military might has been. And certainly we know that the United States and NATO have a lot more mechanical things. But the fact that the soldiers really aren't trained and don't want to really fight Ukraine is not too different, I imagine, if the United States were to get into another Vietnam type war. If anything, Vietnam went incredibly smoothly, considering how bad it could have been. If they started a new conflict now, the vast majority of war age capable citizens in the United States would try to flee the country and not get drafted, and would not want to fight, and would not do much better if they were in a major conflict. So, and I imagine that's true for most countries, is that there is just not that blind obedience that previous generations had, which is a good thing, in the soldier aged people of any country. And there is just not that violence or bloodlust either. Previous generations, particularly in the United States, like it was fairly common to just attack and beat up and punch and get in fist fights, whereas current generations probably never been in a fight in their life, so they just don't have that bloodlust, that attitude, which that overall, if everybody lacks the desire to fight, that creates more peace, at least a little bit more peace around the world. But I would basically laugh at any country that actually thinks they have a vast military things. When you see like the Chinese armies marching or North Korean armies marching and showing off, that is all just ridiculous parade and showmanship. In an actual conflict, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to do the bare minimum. Back to video games there. I went on a bit of a rant for no reason. The Washington Post is axing its video game website launcher. The decision has resulted in layoffs and was described by launcher editor Mike Hume as mind-boggling. I don't think it's super mind-boggling, because I've never even heard of launcher. So, yeah. That's not. 5 employees have been laid off, which is mind-boggling that it was that small for the Washington Post. But yeah, I don't know why they would have a separate website instead of just having a section, a tab under the Washington Post website. Launcher was established in 2019. And yeah, I've never seen a single article from them. So this is very much GameDeveloper.com patting other mainstream video game journalists on the back that don't deserve it. Let's see, we have here a whole list of people. There's Mike Hume, a name I don't recognize as the main guy. Don't recognize this name, this person, this person, this person, or this person. Now, Nathan Grayson sounds familiar, but I think I'm probably thinking of Dick Grayson, who is Robin, or Red Robin, from DC Comics and Batman. Yeah. I've never seen an article from Launcher, never heard of Launcher, never heard of any of these people's names. And if that's supposed to be a mainstream video game journalist website, it's definitely not succeeding very well. Now, one thing I will say is that Launcher is a really great name, so selling that name and that website URL for potentially billions may very well be worth it to Washington Post. Also, the person who owns the Washington Post is, I believe, a somewhat rich old person. Is it Amazon that owns Washington Post? Well, I won't even bother to speculate. I know some old rich white guy almost certainly owns Washington Post, so it's no surprise he wouldn't have much interest in getting video games talked about. You may not be able to hold a trademark or a copyright around the name Launcher. And honestly, if they'd gone Launcher as an LNCHR and spelled it that way, you could get a copyright and have a shorter URL. So that would be definitely something I would try to brand. But if you go LNCHER, it might be Luncher too. Which that's not really a word, but I could see a food website called Luncher. Alright, well, then we've got some fall list cleanup to do. Brightness came out on March 11th, 22. I don't think there's enough of a game here for this to stay on the fall list. Yeah, it doesn't look visually polished enough. Bright Lights of Savetov. First Person Quest. Rated very positively. We'll put that on the wish list. Looks like it's probably just a walking simulator. Brick Builder VR, doing the Legos in VR. 2021. I think at this point I would say no, because A, I'm not going to get a VR headset, and B, why would you play with Legos in the virtual world when you could just play with Legos in the real world? And it's in early access still since 2021, so it's probably never coming out of early access. Breath of the Spirits is mixed reviewed and irrelevant as a VR archery game, so that can go. Breath of the Ghost 2 is mixed reviewed, so that can go. Breakout 13 is rated very positively, so we'll put that on the wish list now. that this came out just January 9th. Although this is a weird one as a kind of like Chinese, Korean abusive prison of kids. With them being tortured and escaping. Yeah, I'm not sure it's really a story I would want to sit through. It's gonna be rough, to say the least. Let's see. Break Bonds Exile is anime of some sort. Interactive story game, they say. Mostly positive from 2021. It's a visual novel. Not very relevant and still in early access. I think we can take this off the fall list at this point. While the visuals do catch my attention, there's just real problems here. And perhaps I have a bit of a bias against Chinese English games too. I shouldn't have had it on the fall list in the first place as a visual novel being labeled early access. That alone is crazy. Breach Warriors. I think I can say no to this. Visuals aren't quite my style. Card-based RPG. Bravery Network Online. Let's see. Turn-based battles in a post-apocalyptic world. Early access from February 21st. Basically, at this point, I'm no longer willing to give the benefit of the doubt for things that came out in early 2021 just because there's a COVID pandemic. I will give this more chance because I really would like to see a fighting game like this. It's interesting to have what is a fighting game and then have a bunch of stances and attacks that are a little bit more wild, where you have people with knives and shields and things like that. It is turn-based though, and that allows for that kind of experience. Really takes it away from being a fighting game. But yeah, this would need to come out of early access. And then Brave Dungeon, the meaning of justice is mixed, so that can go away. Brass Birmingham is mixed, so that can go away. And then that leaves us with that. Let's see, can we come here, do a spectate Duel live, and then do a Duel live while I scroll through my Twitter thing. Twitter is doing some pop-ups that I would probably want to block with their new appearance, as far as telling you to scroll back to the top because there's a new tweet. Let's see. Yeah, the developer direct started about 9 minutes ago. Well, no. I don't know how to read this. I guess it starts in about 40 minutes or 30 minutes from now. Yeah. So, I guess I could watch that since I've... there's... Oh yeah, what am I trying to say here? Yeah, I'll probably watch that stream. It probably won't have anything interesting to say. If Microsoft is smart, they'll have something lined up to get them a lot more sales to make up for the poor sales previously. But it really couldn't be too much that they announced. Here we have a tweet from GameDeveloper.com, and we'll talk about this on Friday. There's a report that says Valve's corporate structure allegedly led to a poor Black Lives Matter response, and here you have a parody of the Valve in the back of a head of a person, with the person being black, dark-skinned. I don't assume that that's a Photoshop. I imagine somebody just did that. That certainly makes a lot of sense. Valve's corporate structure leads to poor responses in general. At what point did Valve need to respond to Black Lives Matter? I don't remember. There may have been a desire for them to tweet out support back when everybody was tweeting out supports for Black Lives Matter, or maybe there was some game out there. Video Games Chronicles says some Walmart and GameStop stores are reportedly already selling Dead Space Remake ahead of its official release on Friday. Dead Space Remake coming out way earlier than I think it probably should. Fox News also went on a rant, apparently, about Microsoft's new features that save electricity, which, yeah, seems like Fox News has really run out of anything substantive to rant about. It's like, regardless of whether you care about climate change or believe in it at all, you almost certainly care about saving money. And so a new feature that would save you electricity is not going to be an issue. I doubt there's that many people willing to pay extra high electricity bills and just leave everything running. Oh man. Chair's going flat too. Let me quickly scroll down my Twitter feed and see if there's anything more. I don't think there's probably anything more to talk about today. And I still am definitely planning on streaming. Streaming on Friday, but they will be just these shorter streams. There's several new cores that support Molten VK for the Libretto, which Molten VK, I guess, is something that people want. Yeah, I think I've seen everything that needs to be talked about. Then I get this pop-up to scroll back. Here we have a interesting, the Double Fine CEO cleaned out his office to repaint and reflooring, which I guess implies he's keeping his office instead of cleaning out his office. I've seen some videos of his office. There's a lot of toys and gadgets in that office, just way too much distractions for the CEO. Even here you can see he's just got like a collection of toys on his desk. It would be surprising, I guess, if he was cleaning out his office and leaving. It would make a lot more sense for him to say he's leaving in a month, 6 months, in a year, and then clear out his office that way, instead of just cleaning it out on the pretense of reflooring and painting and then being fired or moving offices. It's going to start making sense too for Microsoft to move people into unified offices anyways, outside of different buildings. Although I guess in the Double Fine's case, most of the employees are in California, so you can't move them to Washington State, Richmond, Washington, that easily. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.